This video will help you understand how your annuity will be taxed. If you don't know who I am, my name is Chris Dime. I'm a financial planner out of Edmonds, Washington, and I specialize in working with folks to and through retirement. When carefully mapping out the estimated taxes you'll have in retirement to better fine-tune the accuracy of your retirement projections, you're definitely going to want to know what the subsequent tax consequences are of pulling withdrawals or income from various resources. A super popular income source for retirees are going to be annuity income streams, and depending on the type of annuity you have, that's going to dictate how much, if at all, that annuity income stream is taxed. So in today's video, we'll walk through the common types of annuities out there and then ultimately use that to better understand what you can expect from a tax perspective when you go to take money out of these annuities. So let's jump in. Now, today's video is definitely not going to be a deep dive into the efficacy of whether or not an annuity is a good tool. Nor are we going to deep dive into the various product structures or bells and whistles that can be added to an annuity. I think it's just important to philosophically understand an annuity product is an insurance agreement where you give the insurance company money and they promise to pay you out an income guaranteed for the rest of your life. Now, there's playing the joints there as to how long you accumulate money inside there, or how long the income pays you out for, or if it pays you and a survivor after you. But just know it's ultimately an agreement the insurance company is guaranteeing you income for the rest of your life. And it's one of the few vehicles where you can actually use the G word, the guaranteed word, on the income stream. And that's because the insurance company is permitted to guarantee these income streams until you no longer need them. And if the insurance company can't meet their obligations, then your local office of the insurance commissioner has guarantees attached to those income streams as well. So you've got lots of protection relative to the solvency of the insurance company's promise. Now, if an insurance company does go insolvent, odds are you won't get the same level of income, but you're still entitled to some level of guarantee. And while today's focus is going to be the taxation of withdrawals from an annuity plan or income from an annuity plan, just know that annuities can do a lot more. And in my opinion, the general rule of thumb is if you want to buy it from an insurance company, odds are they'll sell it to you. Do you want an annuity that also provides long-term care protection? You've got it. It's called a hybrid plan. Do you want an annuity product that grows based on the compounding of the investment market? You've got it. That's called a variable annuity. And or do you want your annuity policy to grow and compound with the markets, but have a floor if the markets take a dump, and then just know that you're going to be capped on performance if the markets skyrocket? You could totally do that. And that'd be through an indexed annuity plan of some kind. There's also a number of other bells and whistles, like I said, we won't get into, like death benefit or guaranteed payout timeframes if you pass away prematurely, and or continuing that income stream for a survivor, etc. But just know if it's doing anything above and beyond paying you a guaranteed income for the rest of your life, then either explicitly or implicitly, you're going to pay a fee for some additional features and benefits. And while mathematically, I'm not super convinced on the value of an annuity plan compared to like an investment account, for example, I can totally see the value one would derive from choosing to take some chips off the table, knowing that, okay, my investment accounts might not grow as much, but I never have to worry about running out of money through the use of some guarantees inside of this annuity plan. No matter how strategically or how great of a market timer you might be, there's no way to provide guaranteed income through the use of investment vehicles, whereas an annuity plan can provide you guaranteed income. Okay, so let's fast forward. How can we categorize annuities? Well, simply put, there's two categories annuities fall into. Either they're a qualified annuity or they are a non-qualified annuity. A qualified annuity can be further subdivided into either traditional or pre-tax annuities or Roth annuities. You don't really further subdivide non-qualified annuities. If you're trying to figure out what type of annuity you have, if you currently have one, well, the first thing I would do is look at your annual statement. Ideally, you'll at least get one of these a year from the insurance company, and it should say on the statement what type of annuity it is. If it just says qualified annuity, odds are it's one of those pre-tax or traditional annuities. If it is a Roth annuity, generally they'll designate that specifically on the plan, and it'll say Roth annuity. And if it just says variable annuity or indexed annuity or something like that, odds are it's a non-qualified annuity. Now, of course, you could always go one step forward and just call the insurance company, but then you're on hold for a few minutes calling 1-800 and you may or may not want to do that. Bottom line though, there are a lot of different ways to end up with an annuity if you didn't prayerfully consider and purchase one a few years before retirement. For example, if instead of funding an investment-based IRA, for example, you instead opened up an IRA annuity and funded that at $7 or $8 grand a year, you could totally do that. And then you would accumulate a traditional qualified pre-tax annuity. Likewise, instead of funding a Roth IRA and investing that in mutual funds or index funds or whatever, you could open up a Roth annuity and invest that same amount. And that would be called a Roth IRA annuity. And then lastly, and this is the most popular way I see people end up with annuities when they don't, purchase one later on in life after giving it some thought, and that's through an employer-sponsored plan that uses annuities. For example, if you had access to like a 403B plan, or a lot of folks who work at tax-exempt organizations, this is what they have access to. Sometimes, especially for teachers I've seen, they'll end up with what's called a tax-sheltered annuity, or TSA. That's where instead of using mutual funds or index funds inside the 403B plan, they instead use an annuity plan, or they allow you to invest in annuities within the 403B. And if you think that might be you, if your plan sponsor at one point was TIAA, this is the company I see that generally does this kind of stuff. And so you might have some annuities in there to either keep or rebalance or unravel. And I can tell you from experience, if you are planning to unravel, you definitely want to get that ball rolling. I have a client, for example, where TIAA said, yep, we'll absolutely help you unravel these annuities. It's just going to take 10 years of annual distributions from the 403B plan to your IRA. You might also end up with a traditional or pre-tax qualified annuity if you wanted to defer your required minimum distributions. There's a special product called a QLAC or QLAC, stands for Qualified Longevity Annuity Contract, and I'll link above to an explainer video here. But ultimately, if you have money inside of a traditional IRA and you're approaching, or you forecast approaching, required minimum distribution territory, where the IRS mandates you take distributions from your retirement account, you can use a specialized annuity product to defer a chunk of those mandated withdrawals. Now, you still have to take them out, assuming you continue to live, but it allows you to skip a few years. Roth annuities aren't super popular unless, for example, instead of a Roth IRA, you funded a Roth IRA annuity, or if you funded a Roth 403B tax-sheltered annuity, which I've never seen, but legally is totally a possible way you could have been investing. Generally, I'll see somebody with a Roth annuity if the insurance broker convinced them to do like a Roth conversion, where you take money from a traditional IRA or potentially a traditional annuity, and Roth converted it into an annuity product. Now, if I'm an annuity broker, what do you think I'm going to recommend we use to fuel that Roth account you're Roth converting into? Well, an annuity product, because I get paid a commission, generally. So you might see someone go from having a traditional IRA invested in mutual funds or whatever to a Roth IRA that is a Roth IRA annuity. And if you do make post-tax contributions to your traditional IRA and accumulate basis, you're going to want to track that non-deductible contribution on Form 8606. That way, eventually in retirement, you can show the IRS, I already paid taxes on this much money, so my distributions should be in part tax-free. Non-qualified annuities, on the other hand, are generally, in my experience, funded through a lump sum. Maybe someone inherited some money, or they got a big buyout from their company, whatever, and they're looking to take some chips off the table and get money in a tax-deferred accumulation vehicle. We'll touch on the tax benefits in a second of non-qualified annuities, but generally they're funded through like a lump sum, even though you theoretically could just fund them from monthly cash flow. And since you can't lump sum $1 million into a traditional IRA, usually your only option is to lump sum into a non-qualified annuity, assuming you wanted an annuity product. Okay, so what are your tax benefits on the way into an annuity? Well, if it's a traditional or qualified annuity, by funding money from cash flow into the annuity, you probably would try to get a tax deduction. Now, if your income is too high, just like traditional IRA rules, which I'll link above here, if your income is too high and you fund a traditional IRA annuity, well, then you're going to have to be making what's called a non-deductible traditional IRA contribution. There's no cool tax benefits to something like that, though. Instead, you accumulate basis inside of this traditional annuity, and eventually when you go to take the money out in retirement, a portion of that distribution will be return of basis, tax-free, and a portion will actually be income taxable, because you already paid taxes because you never took the tax deduction on the money you funded into that IRA. Same tax benefits on the way into a Roth annuity. Just like a Roth IRA, there are no cool tax benefits to putting money into a Roth account. The money is funded with post-tax income, and you don't get to take a tax deduction. Again though, just like a Roth IRA that you're going to invest in mutual funds or whatever, there are income limitations there, specifically your modified adjusted gross income limits, which I'll link above here, but if you make too much money, you can't fund a Roth IRA annuity out of cash flow. Now those income limits don't apply to rollovers, so you're in the clear there. And lastly, with non-qualified annuities, just like Roth annuities, there's no cool tax benefits for putting money into a non-qualified annuity. It's also funded with post-tax money. Now, what about during this second leg of the life cycle of an annuity, the accumulation phase, where ideally your value goes from here to here in total value of the annuity? Well, this is the easiest part to understand because every annuity gets the same tax benefits, namely tax-deferred accumulation, aka there will not be any capital gains, interest income, dividend income, etc. from money compounding and growing within the annuity. Even through the use of like a variable annuity, for example, where you have sub-accounts that you can trade in between, just like a regular investment account, you won't get hit with capital gains taxes when you rebalance that account over time. Now, this is important specifically for non-qualified annuities because in direct contrast to a non-qualified investment account, for example, if you invested $1 million into like a non-qualified investment account and you rebalanced it over time, you made trades, etc., which is generally what the best minds in finance would recommend doing with money you're going to need for retirement, you're going to pay a whole host of taxes along the way to retirement. You could get hit with capital gains tax, interest income tax, dividend income tax, but then also net investment income tax. And I'll link above to an explainer video there. But there's a whole host of taxes that you will avoid if instead of investing in a non-qualified investment account, you instead choose to invest or use a non-qualified annuity. Dollar for dollar, assuming the fees are the same, which they probably won't be, and assuming the returns are the same, which they may or may not be, the non-qualified annuity should outperform a non-qualified investment account, solely based on taxes. So what about the taxation during the annuitization phase, where you turn the value of the annuity into an income stream you can't outlive? Now, there's other ways to get money out of an annuity plan, and we'll touch on that in a quick second. But if you choose to irrevocably annuitize your plan, a traditional annuity, just like a regular IRA, will come out ordinary income taxable in full. Unless, like I mentioned earlier, you had made some of those non-deductible IRA contributions in there. Since you're not permitted to choose to only pull out the tax-free stuff first, you actually have to take out a combination of the two types of taxation until all of your basis has been returned to you. Then all your distributions are going to be completely income taxable, ordinary income taxable, at whatever income rates are at the time of annuitization. To do the math on what percentage of your income payment would be ordinary income taxable, assuming you had some basis in the plan, you'll need to do what's called an exclusion ratio calculation. To keep it simple, this is something the insurance company can help you with, but you essentially take the total amount of basis in your plan divided by what the total value of your annuity will be. That's going to give you a percentage, and you're going to apply that percentage to every distribution until the dollar value of your basis has been returned to you after a couple years or however long it takes. After that point, then 100% of the income is ordinary income taxable in full. A Roth annuity is the exact opposite. Generally, all of that income is going to be considered tax-free. The only time I could see where your distribution from a Roth IRA would not be 100% tax-free would be if your Roth IRA annuity is in violation of the 5-year rule relative to seasoning. To keep it simple, however, if you haven't had a Roth IRA on the balance sheet for at least 5 years, the portion of that Roth IRA annuity attributable to gain will be considered ordinary income taxable to you. So the simple cheat code is at least have your Roth IRA annuity in existence for 5 years, and then you're in the clear. A non-qualified annuity, as far as annuitization is concerned, is taxed in the same way a traditional IRA annuity is, assuming there was basis in that traditional IRA. Namely, since you for sure have basis inside the non-qualified annuity because you put money into that account post-tax, a portion of the non-qualified annuity will be basis, which is what you put in, and a portion will be gain, what the account has grown by. You'll need to do that same exclusion ratio calculation to figure out what percentage of that distribution is tax-free and what percentage is ordinary income taxable. Again, once the basis has been entirely returned to you, aka the tax-free portion, then all income from then on is ordinary income taxable at whatever ordinary income tax rates are at the time of receiving income. Another exception to keep in mind when pulling income from an annuity is if you choose to pull income before 59 and a half. Now this is different than an investment account in where a non-qualified investment account, you could take money out whenever you want to. If you're going to enjoy the tax benefits of a non-qualified annuity, then you're supposed to wait until 59 and a half before taking money out. Otherwise, those distributions before 59 and a half, barring any other exceptions, will get hit with a 10% early withdrawal penalty tax on whatever the gain portion of that distribution is. So to keep it simple, if you're before 59.5, again barring other exceptions, any money pulled out of a traditional annuity, odds are will be ordinary income taxable plus 10% taxable on all of it. A Roth account, you'll probably only get hit with 10% in penalty taxes and the rest would be tax-free. A non-qualified annuity will have an exclusion ratio applied, and the portion of the distribution attributable to gain will come with an additional 10% penalty tax for an early withdrawal. Like I said, the IRS does permit some various exceptions to premature distributions, and I'll link to those down below. But barring those, a super common one that we've helped clients plan around is through the use of 72T for qualified annuities or 72Q for non-qualified annuities. I'll link above to an explainer video on how those work, but it's essentially a way in which you can take out payments before 59.5 on a regular basis and avoid paying that extra 10% penalty tax. Another way in which you could get money from an annuity without annuitizing is through the use of a withdrawal. These are essentially provisions in the annuity that permit ad hoc distributions from the plan and are not irrevocable decisions for the rest of the annuity. For example, you could take out a withdrawal once and that's the end of it, as opposed to annuitizing, which is going to force you income for the rest of your life. The downside here is there's still that 59.5 rule you have to play within. And like any other investment account, if you're taking money out of the account before fully realizing the value in retirement, well then by definition, you'll just have less money inside the annuity. Different carriers are going to have different rules here, but generally speaking, if you do a withdrawal from an annuity, it's going to get LIFO treatment or last in, first out treatment. Meaning, as opposed to applying an exclusion ratio for an annuity income stream, for example, with a non-qualified annuity where a portion is tax-free and a portion is going to be income taxable, a withdrawal is going to be fully ordinary income taxable. Another way to get money outside of an annuity plan without taking it as income or using it for anything else on your balance sheet would be through the use of a 1035 exchange. That's where you're allowed to take the value of the annuity contract and transfer it over to a different type of annuity plan. Specifically in the non-qualified annuity environment, this is attractive because it prevents you from moving funds over and paying a bunch of taxes to do that. Instead, you get to move over your basis and your gain together and not realize any tax ramifications. Now, 1035 exchanging doesn't absolve you from the insurance carrier's surrender charges, and you might still be within a surrender charge window. But assuming that's all gone, a 1035 exchange can save you a ton of tax and maybe get you into a better annuity vehicle. Qualified annuities, you don't have to do 1035 exchanges on, you could just do rollovers, and those are totally permitted. Last topic relative to annuity income is if you inherited an annuity. Annuities do not receive step-up in bases. So as opposed to a non-qualified investment account, where if someone dies with that inside their estate, they are permitted what's called a step-up in basis, where their basis goes from here, and the total value of the account, and their basis goes all the way to the top, so that the inheritors could theoretically sell the entire account and realize no taxes. Non-qualified annuities do not receive a step-up in basis. And of course, neither do traditional IRAs or Roth IRAs. The original owner's basis turns into the inheritor's basis, meaning distributions from that annuity, however the insurance company decides to distribute it out, will be in part ordinary income taxable and in part tax-free, if basis was still in the contract. On the qualified side, if you inherit those, like I said, there's no step up in basis there, but now you also have to fall into those eligible designated beneficiary and non-eligible designated beneficiary rules, and I'll link above here to explainers on those, or I'll link down below because it's a bit much to deal with. Okay, so from a calls to action standpoint, I think it's important to know what type of annuity you have, how is it performing, and ultimately, what is the plan for income from that in the future. You should know the tax ramifications of turning on income from those plans, and generally they are irrevocable. I think it's also a good call to action to know when the last time your annuity was audited. Since annuity companies, kind of like banks, are always competing for your business to offer you the best value. Also like banks and insurance companies, people generally don't switch carriers. Well, once they buy a product, they try not to look at it for a long time. And all the insurance companies are kind of hoping you do that. That doesn't mean there's not additional value to be had in switching carriers or contracts. For example, if you purchased annuity during relatively low interest rate times, which I guess theoretically is any time from the summer of 2000 to now, as interest rates go up, so do the payouts you can expect for the same dollar value in a contract. And what that means is if interest rates go up, then if you're on an old policy, you might be getting less value for the total money you have if you were to annuitize. You might want to get it audited for performance, but then also a lot of regulations have come out since the 2000s that have made it harder and harder for annuity companies to charge a bunch of internal fees. And so your plan might be on a plan that has very high fees and could be on a plan with very low fees. I'm not sure, of course, but it's worth taking a look at least every 3 or 4 years. Hopefully that was helpful. If you have further questions, I'd say drop them in the comments, but we had to pause comments for now. Feel free to get in touch with me either directly on the website, diamondassociates.com, or through some various other social media channels we have. Have an awesome rest of your week, and we'll talk to you later. Bye.